for like even 2 weeks before the program at IMG started, I had a meniscus surgery done on my knee. That was my first surgery ever.
Wow.
That was a challenge for me, like figuring out like I kind of had to deal with the fact that I might not even make it, you know?
Welcome back to another episode of George on Sports with me, your host, George. And as you can see on the screen here, we have the main man, formerly of the New York Giants, and before that, played a lot of his football with the Saquon Raiders, or the Raiders Terror, or some of you may know them as an Austrian native, played with the Austrian football team as well, running back Sandro Platzgummer. Sandro, I appreciate you coming on the show, and how are you, man?
Thanks for the invite, man. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very well. I mean, I followed your story. And I've seen the progress you've made and the achievements that you have achieved, and I'm glad to have you on the show because I'm looking forward to hearing what it was like for you. So with that, we're gonna take a deep dive and go all the way back and talk about your introduction to the sport of American football. When did that come about?
All the way back. So that was back in 2003. I was 6 years old. My brother just started playing 2 years before me because he's older, and I was one of those kids that always had to move around, you know. I couldn't just sit still, and I think that's a normal thing for most of the kids, and it's a good thing because it's healthy for kids to move around, right? We know this, and so I always had to find that kind of sport that helps me move around, you know. And I tried everything. Like my parents put me in soccer, put me in skiing, put me through all kinds of sports you can do in Austria, right? Which is almost everything. And our neighbor, like our grandma's neighbor, was one of the football coaches, and he told us like just come by practice, and I think your kids are pretty athletic. Like let's see. And I was 4 back then. I think my brother was 6, and I was basically still too young. But when I turned 6 years old, I joined the team and played some flag football, and then tackle started when I was like 9. But basically, I mean, from 6 to 9, even though we played flag, me and some of my friends on the team, I don't know how many kids, maybe 10, 20 kids, we already were tackling each other, like with no pads, but like basically we were playing normal football, even though it was supposed to be flag football. So that's how it all started, man. And I went through all the youth program, all the kind of stuff, U19 national team kind of stuff, and played in Houston Texans when I was 13 for it was kind of like a, how do you call it, SBMSA bowl. It was like a best kids of Houston play against some team from outside the US, and they thought they're gonna blow us out, which they didn't. I scored on the first play. We had a bunch of good players outside of me on the team, and we ended up winning the game. I think they fired every coach from what I heard now. Like I didn't know back then. I was a kid, but even like maybe a year or 2 years ago, I talked to some of my coaches from back then, and they told me like, well, yeah, that was so fun for them. Like they fired everybody. They were supposed to beat us, and it was like an embarrassment. They lost against the town of Innsbruck, which is so much smaller than Houston, and it's Austria. It's not supposed to have American football, you know. So
that
was a lot of fun. But you know, I went through a lot. Like football's been my life so far.
Hold on, I'm gonna take. Did you say you scored in the first play?
The first offensive play, yeah. I don't know if it was the first. It might have been the first touchdown. We definitely on the first defensive possession.
Sorry, hold
one
on.
of our players, Romed, he caught a pick six. So we were up 12-0 at halftime. So that was pretty cool.
I mean, I think it says a lot in terms of, you know, what we're going to talk about in terms of what you've done. But the fact that you played a team from Houston who I suppose thought they were going to come in and just dominate, and it just didn't go that way. And then firing all their staff. So I mean, what a start for you.
That was fun, and I just remember that because back when maybe 2021, I think that was my first preseason game against the Jets, right? First game I ever played in the NFL. And Eli Penny, he was a fullback on the Giants. I don't know if you know him. He was a good guy. He was a fun guy, and he walked up to me like in the locker, and he was like, "Damn, Sandro, you're gonna play your first game on American grounds. You think you're gonna score your first touchdown on American grounds? What's gonna happen?" Like, I said, like, "Hey, man, football is football. You know, we'll see." And I told him actually after the game, I was like, you know that this wasn't the first game on American grounds. I played when I was 13. I even scored a
Mm,
touchdown back then. So, well, it was not the NFL, obviously, but
yeah.
it was American grounds. I was playing there, and I wasn't playing games, but I was practicing with a high school in Michigan when I was 17. So
I saw that. You mentioned that. I did see that. I think I saw on your social media there was some. So I think there was a photo of you and a friend in a Michigan t-shirt. I think you were even.
yeah,
I want to say you were in Michigan, but I did see that. I mean, that's a very interesting way to start things off. The fact that you've kind of had a lot of experience before you've even made it into like the full contact side of things. But it's interesting to hear that you did start with flag because we know flag football is on the way up right now. It was recently announced as being part of the Olympics for
yeah,
2028. And it's a good way for people to get involved. It's low barriers to entry. It's easily
yeah, absolutely.
accessible. So no, it's a great start. I have to say, one of the more impressive starts I've heard about. Um, you mentioned you was a kid who wasn't able to just sit still, right? And I think that goes to show in your playing style. I mean, I know how I would describe your playing style, but how would you describe your running back style?
Well, people nowadays kind of just call it the McCaffrey of Europe because it's very similar to what he does, and I think he's probably the reason why I made it to the NFL. Honestly, I mean, it's a copycat
Wow.
league, and they always take players that are successful. And when I made it to the league, he had these like great couple years in Carolina, right? Then he was kind of a little bit silent while I was there. Now he's like blowing up again with the 49ers, and
Hmm.
I feel like he's obviously like he's my skin color. Maybe that makes I know in the
Yeah,
US that matters, even though
yeah.
to me it doesn't. But he's the same height, he's the same weight. I think when I was in at MG Academy, we had a pro day there. They measure all like arm size, hand
Hmm.
size, um, obviously body weight, height, broad jump, vertical, 40, all those kind of things. And they every single one of those stats was like so close with McCaffrey, like
Wow.
on the shuttle, or like the 20-yard
Yeah,
shuttle.
yeah, yeah.
I even beat him. I think maybe on the L drill I might have. On the broad jump I know I did. On the 40-yard dash I was kind of close. I think my vertical was better. My bench press was better. I think my arm size were
Wow.
about the same. So in a way, like some he was better at some, I was better at some, but all in all, it was very similar. And I think you know I since I played for so long, that kind of gives me confidence too. But I just know from an athletic like standpoint, at least at that point,
Hmm.
I kind of had that confidence knowing that there's nothing in athleticism that I don't have that I would
Hmm.
need in the NFL. Like
Yeah.
if somebody's the same weight, same playing style, same speed, whatever, I mean, it must work somehow. And I think that's the only reason I made it. It would have
Yeah.
not worked if he hadn't been in the league, I think.
It's interesting because when I mean, like I said, you might not know it, but I've known you for a while in terms of I've seen your stuff, I've seen your footage, I've seen your highlights, and that's probably the case for a lot of people who know about the sport in the UK, in Europe. They know about the better players who have played in Europe and who have gone to do good things. And it's funny because when I watch you, I also think about Christian McCaffrey, like the movements you make and the cuts you make, and that's why I asked that question because I was intrigued to hear what you were going to say because I would say similar things: quick, shifty, strong. And that's you even catch balls like the backfield, which is similar to what McCaffrey does. So it's interesting that you do say that. But another thing that I did find really interesting is you mentioned your brother. I don't know anyone. Let me think hard about this. I don't think I know anyone in my. I played for 11 years. In those 11 years, I don't think I know anyone who played with their brother um, at their boyhood team in the Raiders. I mean, he played wide receiver. You play running back. You're both on offense. That's got to be pretty cool, right?
It's pretty cool. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that have that. Actually, the Vienna Vikings, I think they even have a player and
Hmm.
his son. I think they're playing on the same team,
Wow.
which is that's insane to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah, it was fun. Especially it was a lot of fun because not that we played when I was like 9 and 10. He was 11 and 12. That was the same age group.
Hmm.
After that, it's like a 2 year gap, so we always skipped each other. I guess I always was by myself.
Uh,
And then once we got to the men's level, once I was like 17, 18, and I would get to the highest, like the grown ups,
hmm.
he was there, and then we kind of played together again for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
and we had great years. Like that was probably the dynasty of Europe, you could call it. I don't know.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of good players, not just the two of us, but yeah, it was definitely fun. It was cool. I think it helps make yourself a name if there's two of you.
Yeah. Did you guys have any special celebrations every time one of you would score?
uh, we never went crazy, to be honest. I would always find him. Like he would always find me after the touchdown. I would find him if he was on the field on like punt returns or kickoff return touchdowns. Like usually he wasn't on the field.
Mm-hmm.
On home games, I would even try to find my sister who was a cheerleader on the side. So I
Wow.
would kind of
It's a whole family affair,
yeah,
right?
I had like a handshake with her. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
But we'd never, like I said, like we never did like a crazy celebration. I think I don't want to be cocky. I'm not that
Yeah.
kind of player, and
Yeah.
I would just always kind of find my teammates and try to celebrate with them.
Humble and keep it moving. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
So I want to skip to 2020 because I vividly remember hearing that there was this running back from Europe who had been signed to the New York Giants. And when I saw your name, I knew who it was immediately. And part of my mind thought, do you know what? That makes so much sense because this guy has it all. So I want to take you back to 2020, the IPP program. Obviously, you took part in the IPP program where you trained at IMG with guys like James Cook, who I know very, very well here from the UK. But you were on the program with guys like Kareem Hunt, who was there, David Bader was there. How did you hear about the IPP program? How did that come about for you?
I haven't heard of it, to be honest. I mean, I haven't heard much of it. I was just focused on like studying medicine and having fun in life and just playing amateur football. I just try to compete with myself most of the time. Like, I think when after like 2016 or so, I was like 19. That's around the age when I kind of was the only person that would, I don't know, jump over 3 meters, like 3 meters, 30 centimeters, something like that. And I was good at the 40-yard dash. I was good at most of the drills, and every year I would just try to beat my own numbers rather than just saying like I want to be the best at that number. And I think that's what helped me a lot over those years.
And in terms of you joining the program, how did that come about? Did someone reach out to you?
Yeah. James might have been the first one.
Okay.
James Cook. Either him or Will Bryce, but I think it was James Cook who reached out for the first time. I think somebody texted me during the season at some point, like, you haven't played your best football yet. I don't know who it was. It must have been someone who knew, but that was like early in the season. And after the season, I was the MVP in the final game. We beat the Vikings again, Had an undefeated season in general. Like, that was one of the few ones we never lost a game. And so he called me and he was like, once he called me, we talked about this whole, like, how does it work? Who was in here? Like, what's the goal and everything? And how do you get in and everything? That's kind of where I looked into it. And that's when I found out that, well, it's actually possible to make it to the NFL from Europe. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Because they don't really scout over here. And I kind of felt like, well, if I can just get close to my numbers that I have with the testings for the Raiders, I think I have a chance. I think I have a pretty good chance because our coach Andy Preller, he would always kind of try to compare some of our, like, the best player at every drill. He would compare it in the NFL. Like you said, like, well, this is how many reps on the bench press somebody has, and Haverteen has this many, whatever, And I had this kind of number in a broad jump and 40, whatever. So I kind of had this idea I can make it, and so once I talked to James and they try to figure out what kind of person I am, what kind of player I am, if I could even fit like this whole thing, if I'm mentally strong enough, because to be honest, like, after being in there, like, I think that's the biggest challenge by far.
Right.
Like,
Right. Mentally.
like, just obviously you got to be there physically. You got to be good enough, because you can't be confident enough if you're not good enough. But I think just the mental part of being treated as always the 91st player, no matter what you do, it's like, you got to be able to deal with that, I don't know everybody that's in a IPP program. Like, right now it changes, right? It's probably I think that was the era right now of the toughest part, because you could never be allowed to play but you still had to kind of be there and
Yeah.
try to get another chance the next year, whatever.
Hmm.
So that was the mental thing was really hard, and I think that's what they try to figure out. It's like, is he mentally
Yeah.
strong enough? And obviously, I went through a lot of mental things before. Like even 2 weeks before the program at IMG started, I had a meniscus surgery done on my knee. That was my first surgery ever. That
Wow.
was a challenge for me, like figuring out like I kind of had to deal with the fact that I might not even make it, But I did, and everything worked fine. But
Worked
that
well.
was a mental challenge. It kind of prepared me for these next mental challenges.
Hmm. And I'm glad you said that, because it is a very important part of any kind of walk of life, in particular when it comes to sports. And people don't always shine a light on that aspect, and it is very, very important, because whilst you can be physically ready, you can run fast, you can jump, if you don't have the strength or the capability to reach out when you need the help, then that can definitely affect your game. So it's important, and I'm glad you have mentioned it for sure. Um, you mentioned it there, the IPP. It can be tough. You're going from playing every week in Austria, where you know what you're doing, you're schemed up, you know the playbook in and out, to where a bit of a culture change is what I was going to ask you. You now in New York. New York, you're with IMG for the IPP, and then you get signed to the New York Giants, which I have to say is amazing in itself. So before we
Hmm.
talk about the cultural shock, if any, take me back to the moment where you knew you were going to be signing with the Giants. What did that feel like for you?
I didn't realize it at that point. Like I just, I just figured like, and maybe it sounds a little odd, but at that point, I would have been so disappointed if I wasn't in because I know I did well. Like I know
Yeah,
I was just, even though I had this injury, like I was kind of at a peak somewhat in my life at football. I know I had like great numbers in the testing. I know I had this like experience of football more than probably most Europeans.
yeah,
And to me, it just wouldn't have made sense if they didn't take me. Like obviously now it's different. Now they kind of look more into like linemen and that kind of stuff because they know that they don't want to give skilled players really a chance in the NFL if you're not from the US, right? I mean, you can say that somehow.
hey, it's fair
Um,
enough.
so I think it looks like they're trying to go offensive linemen or big guys only, like tight ends,
Okay.
offensive linemen, defensive linemen. At least
Hmm.
like I think I've seen the class of the last 2 years or maybe this year at least.
They've been D line, O
Yeah,
line, yeah.
it's a lot of. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, that's what the NFL likes, and that's what
Hmm.
they want to push because that's I think comparably like the worst position.
Hmm.
That's the position where they can improve the most by bringing
Yeah,
in just athletes from overseas because there's not that many people that can have that amount of strength, weight, and
it's
size.
rare. Yeah, it is
It's
rare.
more rare. Like
Yeah.
people that my size, obviously maybe not my athleticism, but my size. I mean,
Hmm.
half the population is my size. Like it's kind of different. And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and
yeah,
we talked about this before the show. Glenn Tunga was with me
yeah.
on the in the not at the IMG but at the combine before in the fall 2019 in
Hmm.
Düsseldorf where he's playing now, right?
Yeah.
Um, so and he was a fun guy. Like I remember he had like this kind of podcast going on, and I think they almost took him. He did pretty well. He might have pulled his hamstring or something. I think there was something going on. And there was
Hmm.
another running back that also got hurt. I think I ended up being the only one that kind of got through the whole testing healthy. I think,
Yeah.
but I could be wrong. But yeah, he was doing well, and I'm glad that
Hmm.
he's doing well now. He's a good guy.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about Glenn and where you guys are at in the ELF right now, because obviously you have joined another team. But before we come to that, um, joining the Giants, this was during the COVID period, which is a distant memory for a lot of people. I imagine, obviously, you had a number of training camps. You were with the Giants for I think 3 seasons, pretty much.
Hmm.
But during COVID, a lot of these things would have been interrupted. So how did that affect your camp, your training, and what it is you guys had to do? Did they put you in a bubble?
Yeah, that was crazy. I left for New York knowing that there's likely gonna be a training camp starting within the next couple weeks. They didn't know it. They didn't have a time, because of COVID.
Mm,
And at that time, I was already kind of struggling with the workouts. I was mostly working out at home because all the gyms were closed.
yeah.
And so I flew out to New York early July, maybe late June. I was sitting in a hotel and I was not supposed to leave my hotel. I was just ordering food 3 times a day. I started watching The Office. So I was just not. I've been to the US, like we talked about this. Like I've been to the US before. I didn't really have a
Yeah.
culture shock, in like maybe a little bit, but not really.
Hmm.
I was good at English. Like I had no issues, but it was the biggest issue was just like, well, I was on the phone. At least I could talk to people on the phone, but it was just weird. Like I've never been by myself for a couple of weeks, but ever
Hmm.
in one room. Like it was so weird.
Yeah.
Um, and then they moved me to another hotel when everybody else came in. So everybody had to quarantine, I think, for another 2 weeks or so. So
Wow.
I had like a total month in a hotel. And so, yeah, that was crazy. And then I
Yeah.
knew there was no, around that time, they kind of released that there was not going to be a preseason. So my motivation was like, I mean, I'm not in perfect shape anymore. I'm just sitting in a hotel trying to do body weight stuff. And in a climatized hotel. It's like 95
Hmm.
degrees outside New York
Hmm.
in the summer, and probably everybody else wasn't at their best shape too. But I don't know. I knew it was not going to be a preseason game. I kind of had to understand that there's no way they were going to play me in a regular season game without
Hmm.
preseason, or let alone because I'm European. So my motivation was so, but I was open to it. I was just like, oh, fuck it, I'm just gonna.
Yeah, it's an opportunity, right? I mean,
Yeah,
COVID is just frustrating because it hampered so much, in particular where you've
yeah,
just been signed and you can't.
yeah.
I think I saw some photos of you working out in your hotel, like you were
Oh yeah, I
adapting and
definitely
having
posted
to.
some. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean that was my life. I mean,
yeah,
there's
yeah, and
not much else I could have posted. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, and so training camp was still fun. I mean, I remember the first day being out on the field. It was I think it was 95. It was like somewhat for people in Europe. It's like it was 35 Celsius. It was humid. New York gets humid. It's almost
yeah,
like
man.
Florida in the summer. And then um, I think after like we had like an hour in the field. After the first 45 minutes, a couple of players just like overheated. Like we just couldn't finish it.
I'm
And I was
done.
one of them. Like I was like,
Yeah.
I was started seeing black. I was like, damn.
Wow.
I think
Like,
my body temperature was 39 Celsius at that point or something like that.
ooh,
So it was kind of
yeah.
dangerous. And well, I guess that's what happens when you come out of a hotel. And I started to acclimate to it pretty well. Like I think
Hmm.
I had a headache for the rest of the day, and then after the next day where we only had like indoor workouts, I was pretty much fine. And
Yeah.
I started to drink enough and do all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So that was good. And I think I had a few good plays even in that camp. Like
Yeah.
maybe there was this like one play with Saquon in the back. People remember that.
You've literally just read my mind because one of the points I was going to ask you about, which I'm going to ask you about now, is your relationship with Saquon Barkley because I've seen it and it's a real thing. I've seen it. That photo you're talking about, I've seen the same photo where I think you've made an explosive play through one of the gaps, and in the back of the photo, slightly blurred out, is Saquon Barkley losing his mind and he's cheering for you. So I'm going to ask you that question because you're on a New York Giants squad with one of the best running backs we've seen to date in Saquon Barkley, or Quadzilla, some people like to call him. What was your relationship with Saquon Barkley, and how much did he help you?
We had a normal relationship, quite honestly. I mean, he was definitely when I got on the times when I was allowed to get on the field in the
Hmm.
preseason, especially like, or even in camp sometimes, or even on scout team in the season sometimes. Like he would be that kind of hype guy. Like maybe not just for me, but for many. But I feel like I was just they kind of looked at me like the foreign exchange student that was just trying to like,
Right,
you know,
make it, yeah,
nobody expected him to be good because he's
yeah,
not from here, and people don't even think we play football. And then when I had a good play, like everybody was kind of hyped up, and Saquon was, and so I'm thankful for that.
yeah.
He was trying to, even after my big run against the Jets, like he was all over
Oh,
me.
I'm coming to that. Don't worry, I'm
Yeah,
coming to that point.
the last year, like my third year when I played the Patriots in the first game,
Hmm.
and I got the last three plays,
Yeah,
try to get us in field goal range, and you know how tough it is, like being standing on a sideline for 3.5 hours and then
yeah.
just stepping in and trying to do something when it's kind
Hmm.
of trash time. And I had this like 25-yard run and two more short runs, and I kicked the field goal and won. Like
Hmm.
it's a preseason game, but we still won.
It counts, man.
And Saquon kind of like tapped me up, and I was able to break down the team in the locker room after that. So
Hmm.
it was a good time for sure. I wish I
Yeah.
got more opportunities, of course, but everybody does. But
I
my
think.
relationship with the players, especially, was the most important thing, to be honest. Not
Hmm.
just Saquon, like, because
Yeah.
there's always these coaches, there's always some GMs. Most of the coaches, I think, were on my side, and they were excited for me. They wanted me to get more playing time, but the people on top seemed like they always looked at me like, just a European,
Yeah.
and none of my teammates did. I felt like every one of my teammates was like rooting for me. Everybody was like, and nobody was mad if I was like doing well in practice. If I would make the defense look bad on like some occasions, like it just happens sometimes,
Hmm.
or I would just beat somebody on a one-on-one route or something. Nobody was mad. Back in Austria, I was kind of used to people being mad at me for that. In the NFL,
Yeah.
everybody sees it as business, and if you do a good job, like, I think one of my good friends, even a linebacker, he was, I'm not gonna say his name, but he was. I was talking to him a lot, and a lot of the times he had to cover me because it was kind of like the third team in there,
Hmm.
and and I think he slipped once or twice when I got him on a route a little bit, and I felt bad because he ended up getting cut. I don't know if it was because of
Oh
that,
man, yeah.
and but he was never mad at me. He was always like, "Yeah, I mean, I
It's
didn't do
part of the
well.
game, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
part." So,
Yeah.
but I had to learn that. Like coming in, I thought I'm an asshole if I do that. But in a way,
You
nobody's mad
kind of,
at you. So
yeah,
it's
no.
like,
I mean,
yeah,
you're there to try and make the team. You're there to try and prove a point. You're
yeah,
there to try and put yourself on the map. So you have to do what you got to
yeah,
do. And on
yeah.
that note, you mentioned it. That run, I think it was maybe 46, 47, 48 yards against the Jets from your end zone. Um, Now you mentioned someone. Well, you haven't mentioned yet, but Christian Wade is someone who you know well, obviously because of the IPP, and we've seen that he did a similar thing. I know he went to the house, took it to the house, but to be in an NFL game, preseason or not, to be wearing the blue and red and white colors of the New York Giants, and to do that from your end zone, you made a guy miss, the trademark kind of shuffle, the cut, and you keep it going. In your mind at that point in time, did it hit you that you'd actually made a play in the National Football League in the preseason game for a national football team in the New York Giants? Or did it ever hit you, or were you so focused on just next play, next play, next play?
And not at that moment. Like, to be honest, maybe the next day when Instagram crashed on me because something
Yeah,
like that, and people were going crazy in Austria, even though I was like, it's just a preseason game. But yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of players on the field that run a 4-3. There's a lot of starters on the field, even in that Jets game. So that was worth
yeah.
something. I know that, and I couldn't have done it if I hadn't had like my running backs coach and
Hmm.
running backs assistant coach in 2021, I think it was.
Hmm.
They believed in me. Like, I know they did, and they told me that too, and they said, like, just go out there, and I knew it myself. Like, I have nothing to lose. I mean, what if I fumble the ball and fuck it, I'm just gonna go back to Austria.
Yeah,
And if I
yeah,
don't, like, maybe I get a chance.
yeah.
But I can't just like be scared of it because it's not gonna.
That's it.
Then it's definitely not gonna work.
Like,
So that was my mindset. Yeah. After
yeah,
the first year where I didn't play at all, I kind of was like, you know what, fuck it. I mean, I don't want to be here for 3 years and not do anything. So yeah, and they believed in me. They told me that, and they were proud of me after the game, and
hmm,
they were happy too because I know there's there's not every coach believed in me. It's like
hmm.
I
No, I get
knew
that.
there was these guys like they're
Rooting
kind
for
of
you.
like questionable for why is there an international program? We don't need this. We're the best at football in the U.S.
Hmm.
and and it kind of stuck it to them. And I remember like I think the strength coach, he was a big fan of me, and he would standing there in the cafeteria with me, and he was like, after that run, he was showing it to someone, I don't know who it was, like it was one of the questionable guys, and he was telling him
Hmm.
like, leading rusher right here. So, and that was a lot of fun. So people always try to sit
Yeah,
up. Obviously, that's a very embarrassing moment for me because I don't want to say none. Like, I just want to let my
yeah, I
actions
get that.
speak. But at the
Yeah,
same
I get
time,
that.
I'm thankful for the people that kind of stood up for me,
Hmm.
and kind of helped me with, even though I was confident, like, you need some people to believe in you. Like, you
Of
can't
course,
just, if
of course.
none of the coaches believe you can do it, like, it's hard to think yourself that you're gonna be able to do it, and
Of course,
that was
of
pretty
course.
big.
Um, so you also came to London as part of the international series. I believe was it the Giants, the Packers game? I think it might have been.
I was, yes, Giants Packers.
Were you? I mean, I don't think you were, but you obviously know about the sport. You know how big the sport is internationally as well. Were you surprised at how the fans travelled to watch the international games at the Tottenham Stadium, or for you was it football is here? We know it's in Austria, we know it's in Europe, we know it's in the UK. Maybe not to the same levels, but did any of that surprise you? Seeing the amount of people in the stands, seeing the sold out once again.
No, I mean, obviously, that wasn't the first NFL game
Mm,
in London by far. Like they've done it for
no,
years, right?
yeah,
So that didn't surprise me at all. I think it was definitely one of the cooler games to be in. I think the environment was just a little bit more exciting than it is with games in the US. That's
hmm
just my opinion, maybe, but
yeah,
maybe it just reminded me of home. And I obviously didn't play that game. I wish I could, but
yeah.
I was maybe more. I wasn't even surprised that the games in Munich and Frankfurt would be so big, because I know that football in
It's
Germany
huge.
it might even be a bigger deal than in London, right, or in England.
It's a big deal over
It's a
there. I mean,
it's a
they have
big
a
deal.
great domestic league in the GFL. It's been running for years as well, so it makes sense.
Yep, yep, and not even just obviously European football is getting bigger too,
Hmm
but I think the NFL has been kind of big for a while. You know,
Yeah,
the NFL in Germany has been huge. Like there's a lot of fans watching. I think
there are.
somebody even told me that there's more people playing fantasy football in Germany than there are in the US,
That's
which
crazy.
I didn't believe at the time. Maybe it's not true, but
Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I'll check that one out
yeah,
because
you got to
that's
check it
interesting.
out.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, you had your amazing stint with the Giants. I know it doesn't go the way you wanted it to go, but there are not many people who say they've had that first-hand experience, with a team like the Giants, in stateside in New York, even being at the IMG for the academy. But I say all of that to say, obviously, you have your 3 years. You then come back to your home, your boyhood team in the Raiders, which would have felt amazing for you, like a homecoming, only to tear your ACL. Now, anyone who plays the sport knows about injuries. It's part of the game, unfortunately. Um, and you happen to tear your ACL. Your recovery. Now, there are a lot of people who talk about recovery for ACL depending on what happened and what kind of tear you had. But what was your recovery like, and how? Given that you've spoken about mental issues before, particularly when it comes to injuries, I suppose you already dealt with one earlier on. But what was your mental state like, and how did you deal with the rehab for your ACL?
Oh, it's a mental challenge for sure. I think it's for everybody, and
Yeah,
I think that was the worst time to kind of tear it because when you're in the NFL tearing it, at least you were there tearing it. I was just trying to give back and be playback here for home for a lot of people here, and finish my medical school, which was only for a
hmm
year. Obviously to get hurt here, that was tough, and even I even have, I wouldn't be so mad if I had like 4 or 5 games that I played healthy, before
yeah,
at least, then I would have had something out of it. I didn't really play the first couple of games because I had another injury to deal with on my how's it heel.
yeah.
It's like a plantar fasciitis with a tear in it. So, and that was one of the most painful things. That was probably more painful than my
Then the
ACL
ACL.
was, even though the ACL takes longer and the recovery is very, very painful right now.
hmm
But yeah, so that was really tough. And in a way, like I guess some things just go a certain way that you can't control, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's the right way. I don't know.
hmm
Maybe I needed to have this to experience it as a future doctor to treat patients like that. And I think I've said that before a couple of years
Yeah.
back, is that I should have every injury once just to be able to help people later on. And I
Mm.
never wanted to have this one, but you know,
Yeah.
it just
Of
happened,
course.
and
Yeah.
now I'm just trying to do the right
Step back.
thing with around that.
You mentioned medical school and something I picked up on as well, doing my research. How did you do that whilst you were trying to achieve everything you achieved? Did you have to put that on hold before you were able to come back and complete the course?
I did, yeah. I always communicate. I think I'm a very communicative person. I try to do the right thing all the time. I
Yeah.
wouldn't just never say anything, just leave. But I talk to the people on the even before I left for IMG Academy, even I think maybe before the combine
Okay.
in Düsseldorf, I approached him, the president of the medical university, asked him like, what if I have this chance to go do this training for a couple of months? Like, can I somehow like change my schedule so maybe I have more towards the summer, or I
Yeah.
can do more in advance, stuff like that. And they kind of helped me with that a little bit. So I was able to do that. Obviously, when I
Okay.
left and when I came back, um, COVID happened, right? So
Yeah.
I didn't have to change anything around because nothing was going on anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I stayed in contact with them. They I don't think they had to do much. I basically just said I wasn't going to be there, so they can
Hmm.
take my spot for somebody else. And then I did some exams in the times I was here. Sometimes, like after my first year, I took two exams, but for most part, I didn't do much. It's all
Hmm.
in person, and I wasn't there in person, so I couldn't do
Yeah.
it. And when I was there, it was February. There's semester break, so
Worked
it
out
kind
quite
of
well
just
then, it seems.
yeah, it worked
Yeah.
out pretty well. And studying in Austria doesn't cost much at all, if any at all. So it's not like I paid these like thousands
Yeah.
of euros just to stay enrolled.
Yeah.
But yeah, I pushed it back, and at first that was kind of like not so easy for me because there's 100 people that I knew in my year. A lot
Hmm.
of my friends were studying with me for 4 years
Yeah.
already. I didn't want to be in a different year
Delay
and
it anymore.
be by myself again. But I think that
Yeah.
was a cool experience too. Just to when I came back now, I was in two different years because I did two in one
Ah.
to kind of make up for the last year, because the last year was more like a year and a half, and I kind
Okay.
of squeezed it into 9 months.
Hmm.
So I was in two different years. So with the year I used to study in, I basically now know like three different kind of generations of medical students, and that was fun. Like it was
That's pretty
actually
cool.
pretty
Yeah.
smooth. Yeah.
Sandro, okay. I mean, we've talking about your story, the things you've accomplished, having to deal with mental health. You will know that there are tons and tons of players who are trying to achieve their goal, whether it be make it to the ELF, whether it be signed to the NFL academy, or like yourself, make it to the NFL and be signed to an NFL team and playing a preseason game. So before we wrap up the show, I'm going to ask you, for anyone who watches this or listens to this and they're thinking about trying to make it, how they can make it to where perhaps you made it or even further, what's your best piece of advice to those people?
Best piece of advice. Just work hard. Try to do the things that feel right. Work with the people that you enjoy working with. Try to just be your best. I don't know. There's no super special thing you can do. Is
Mm-hmm.
just grind. Be smart about it. Don't get hurt by over grinding. Just try to push your body to wherever it needs to be. And
Yeah.
and things with me, I never pushed it. I never expected it to happen that way.
Okay.
And I think you need that. I think if you say like I only want to go to the NFL if I don't, like, my life is not worth anything, the chance of it gonna happen is it's not very high. I think
Mm-hmm.
if you know, like, I'm gonna try this, like I did with the Giants, right? It's like I'm gonna try it. I'm trying to give my best.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, I got something else to do. Like, I got some other things in life that I enjoy. But right
Okay.
now, this is what I want to put everything I have into this. I think that's the most important thing. And quite honestly, I'm trying to. I still have football growing that way. I know
Mm-hmm.
that since I made it there, I have more reach. I have like people monitor closely what I do a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna try to still keep making a push. And saying like, hey, these players in Europe can play. Like, we better
Mm-hmm.
get some other players over there. I
Well,
don't
I guess
think that's
that
gonna
links
be.
to the Frankfurt Galaxy, right? Where you are now, and you're going to be playing your football with the Frankfurt Galaxy. You talk about still trying to be involved in football. I guess this is the next step for you.
Well, it is, but at the same time, I'm in an environment that I just feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people there. I've known them
Yeah.
for years, um, and obviously it's a big market. And I know that on the side, I'm not just gonna do it just to make it back to the NFL.
Hmm.
Last year it was probably very realistic. I could go back now after the ACL and being away for a year. That's not my main goal. If
Yeah.
it happens, it
Yeah.
happens. But my main goal is just to have a nice comeback season, prove to myself and prove to other people that you can come back from an ACL, and I can come back as strong or stronger, whatever.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen, and by doing that, at least I can get forward with my career as well. I'm working in a hospital in Frankfurt, so I know it's not like if my knee's not healthy, if something doesn't work out, if I get hurt again, there's so much that can happen. Like, I'm not
Absolutely.
dependent on this. I'm not like dependent on making it back to the NFL, because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And if it works, it works, and I think that's something that I think Arnold Schwarzenegger said it once, and he's an Austrian, right? So he said, don't be afraid to fail. Like, if you can't be afraid to fail. If you think like, if I fail, people are gonna think I'm terrible. I'm just like awful. I'm not a good player or whatever. If I fail, like, I can't do anything in life. And a lot of players in the NFL are like that, because that's the only thing they do in college, really.
Yeah.
And at least they have some education, but most of the players do it just for football, which is fine. But at least do something that you enjoy in life, and make sure that you have like this second leg that I can do right now because I got hurt.
Yeah.
What else would I have done for a year? Like, just recover.
I mean, Sandro, you can't go wrong when you're quoting Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the greatest of all time, So
Right.
on that segue, that is the show, and what a way to end it as well, Sandro. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. You've achieved so much, and you've done so much, and like you said, people do want to see what you're doing, and myself included, because we're intrigued to see, your experience and what you've done. It's good to follow in your footsteps and see that it's possible to do because you've done it. So, Sandro, appreciate you having on the show. Looking forward to your season with the Galaxy and whatever else comes after that. But until the next episode, I've been George from George on Sports, here with Sandro Platzgummer, now with the Frankfurt Galaxy, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.